right now on Indianapolis This Week.
We didn't do it to cause any problems or discomfort.
A Sunday exclusive. Mitch Daniels and the Purdue plan that may force other schools to rethink college costs and what's making the problem worse. And we go where cameras are off limits.
If I had to step aside completely, I probably wouldn't have done that.
The lady who made history and her future plans on the federal bench.
From RTV6, the Indy Channel, this is Indianapolis This Week with Rafael Sanchez.
A Sunday exclusive with Mitch Daniels. He's candid, concerned, and critical. The state's former 49th governor is now serving his second year as the president of Purdue University.
We had a chance to visit for about 30 minutes. In his office, he showed us several pictures which have shaped his presidency so far. He was inspired by the way his university family responded to the campus shooting in January. And he was touched that during the Notre Dame football game, he was asked to ride his motorcycle in support of his team. But President Daniels is stirring the pot indirectly, forcing other schools to rethink tuition increases. Purdue is looking to hold the line for a third year. It's where we began our conversation.
You talked about wanting to make sure that you understand the effectiveness of a college education and want to make sure that people are getting their bang for their buck. How will you do that as you take a look at what's happening here at Purdue?
You do two things. One is you do try your best to control the cost and keep that end down. The other thing that higher ed has not been called on to do before is to measure with some real rigor the value of the education later. Now, Purdue, we're trying to take a lead on that too. Within about a month, the nation will get its biggest and most comprehensive look ever at the success level of college graduates, people from all different kind of schools. And we'll know things with more certainty than we have before about how much it really does add, not just to your income and material success in life, but also to your satisfaction and fulfillment, engagement in your community and things like that. And so we're partnered with the Gallup organization to do that. And meanwhile at Purdue, we're going to measure our own graduates side by side and see how they stack up compared to the national norm.
And you say you don't mean to bring discomfort to others, and I believe that. But you're not someone who sits on the sidelines. You have a history of looking at things and making them either better or say, hey, can we look at it a different way? Do college presidents, your colleagues around the country, need to look at these issues so that parents can say, you know what, if I am paying $40,000, $60,000, $20,000, then I know what I'm paying for?
They better get started. I mean, apart from anything we might do here at Purdue, I do believe that the marketplace belatedly is starting to ask for proof of value and for some relationship of what a student learns and how much they grow to what it costs to produce that result. And, you know, there's some very interesting facts that come to light lately. A higher percentage of this year's freshmen across the country than ever before report that they did not take their first choice, but moved on to a second or third choice. And what was the reason? Almost always, it cost too much. So I think these other schools, if they have felt insulated and have felt they could just raise price without end, are seeing now that the consumer is starting to look harder and push back.
You raised some concerns about the Pell Grants. Some use them very obviously to pay their college costs, but you've called it before easy credit and just too easy scholarship money that propels college costs. Do you still hold to that?
Well, I'm actually less concerned about Pell Grants than I am the loans, the student loan programs, which are now completely owned and operated by the federal government. And this isn't an original thought. Many scholars and others have pointed out in recent years that the money that's been flooded into higher ed with the best of intentions mostly has been pocketed by schools. They saw the students approaching with all these low-cost loans, raised their prices to capture most or all the money, and the student wasn't any better off. So when student borrowing is bigger than auto borrowing, is bigger than all the credit card loans put together, it's over $1 trillion now, we've got a problem. And we here at Purdue are determined to first of all, minimize any borrowing that any student has to do by keeping the cost down, and secondly, to deliver an education so unimpeachably valuable that they can easily handle any loans they had.
Higher ed is seen as a big industry, and most recently a member of the National Labor Relations Board said that at Northwestern, college football players can be considered employees. They could unionize. Are you concerned at all, sir, that this will spread to the public institutions, or at least at Purdue? Will your football players and basketball players be part of some union in the future?
Well, I think it'd be a very bad idea. I think it's flawed logic, and maybe it'll be reversed when it gets to a somewhat fairer tribunal, some court somewhere. I don't think it's right at all. I think that student athletes, I guarantee you, at Purdue, these are genuine student athletes. Our athletes have outperformed academically the student body as a whole for many, many years in a row. And I can testify they're working very hard to achieve a degree the honest way. I don't think they think of themselves as employees. If they are, they're very well paid employees because the whole value of a full ride scholarship here is hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I hope this decision doesn't spread or doesn't even last. But it really won't affect what we try to do here at Purdue University, which is think about academics first, run an honest program that pays for itself. Very few do, but ours does. And under those circumstances, I think the students will see themselves as they always have.
Do we need to rein in sports? Are sports, have they gotten too big, or are they at the right spot?
It's a hard question because I'm a very passionate sports fan, always have been. But if you're not bothered by a lot of what goes on in Division I athletics, I think you need to pay closer attention. There's hypocrisy, there's cheating, there's excess, there's so much money, and the priorities are not where they ought to be. And so I do hope that for one reason or another, one of these lawsuits, this unionization thing, or just the internal debates that the NCAA is having, I do hope that real change will come. We can get this thing back where it once was, where the athletics was still fantastic, still great performances, but there was no question these were students you were watching.
As our conversation continues, what did he learn from Presidents Reagan and Bush and General Colin Powell, and is baseball in his future? Later, the federal judge some call a trailblazer, why she wants to slow down and share the gavel. In a matter of weeks, Purdue University will play a big role in the Indy 500 activities. President Daniels works on keeping up with his vibrant campus, but his toughest days on the job followed the campus shooting back in January.
I don't think that day in January will ever be an ordinary day at Purdue. But if good can come out of something so horrible, some did in this case, the way our students instantly, spontaneously organized themselves, university didn't do it, administration didn't do it, faculty didn't do it, our students assembled within hours in the freezing cold and filled that courtyard outside this building, and then in the following days not only helped each other but just enveloped the family. When I went to Matthew's funeral in Wisconsin, person after person came up to me and said, "You're from Purdue?" "Yes, yeah." And they said, "I just want you to know how impressed we were with what we saw of your university these last several days." So you talk about people being at their best at the worst of times. It was one of those situations, and I want to give all the credit really to the young people here.
You've always surrounded yourself around leaders. Some would call them great leaders. Former President Ronald Reagan, former President George Bush, people like Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell, who'll be in Indianapolis. What do you learn from those folks? Someone like Colin Powell, who'll be here next week. What do you learn from someone like that?
I have been lucky in both public life and in business to work with and for some outstanding leaders. Each, you learn a little something different from each one. Dick Lugar, it was integrity, tell the truth, first, second, and third. President Reagan, it was think big, concentrate on the big opportunities to make things better. But there are similarities about these folks too. They lead exemplary individual lives. People are not that likely to follow someone who doesn't set a good example. And Colin Powell's a great example. He served well and led well, but it started with who he was and the character that he had demonstrated all the way up from modest upbringing to the top of the U.S. military and beyond.
So, Mr. President, Mr. Governor, final question. The gotcha question. So you've been an executive at Eli Lilly, you've been a governor, you've worked at the White House, you're a college president. You talk a lot about baseball. So who should be the next baseball commissioner, you or Condoleezza Rice?
Well, I missed my chance, you know. Actually, some people did mention that to me, and I said, don't bring that up. This was before Purdue. I said, don't bring that up. You know, that's a fantasy that's too enchanting for me to really think about. No, I don't know. I remember that the former president of Yale, Bart Giamatti, was for a sadly brief time the commissioner of baseball. He died suddenly after only, I don't know, 2-3 years. I thought he was going to be a very interesting choice, however. He was a great baseball fan, but he also had an outlook, a philosophy that I think was an interesting dimension. That's America's sport. I want to see more young people playing it, more inner city kids playing it, and I hope whoever's next will be a real enthusiast for maintaining and even rebuilding interest in the game.
President Daniels, thank you so much.
Enjoyed it.
Daniels is fond of his working relationship with former Secretary of State Colin Powell. Mr. Powell is scheduled to be in Indianapolis on Thursday as part of the premier Stewart Speaker Series. Powell will speak at the Indy Downtown Marriott on Thursday at 7:45. Tickets are still available. Your state refund is not for the taking. The Department of Revenue is expecting to find more people this week who are using stolen personal information to steal tax refunds. In the past 2 months, more than 1,500 attempts have been stopped. The agency says, had it not been using a new software program, $2.8 million more than likely would have been mailed out to scam artists. The commissioner adds that more fraud will be uncovered with more than 1 million returns expected to be processed after April the 15th. She was the first woman ever appointed to the bench of Indiana's federal court. Soon, she'll take a lighter role on senior status. After the break, a one-on-one interview with Judge Sarah Evans Barker. Humble, hard worker, history maker. These are just a few of the words people use to describe Sarah Evans Barker, the first woman to serve on Indiana's federal court. Judge Barker informed the president that she will go on senior status, allowing Mr. Obama to appoint another judge to help with the court's heavy workload.
Wasn't an easy decision. I've had to mull it over and think about it. You know how it is when there's nothing external that forces a decision like health or family needs or a term limit, then you have to do all the work internally to decide how you should organize your life and plan things out in an effective way. So I've been doing that internal work for a little while, but recently it occurred to me that this is a propitious moment. This is, as the lawyers would say, this is ripe for a decision.
You don't have to say who fills the vacancy, but you know that it always becomes political. What should go into, removing the politics aside, what should go into picking that jurist who should come and help out this district?
The things that are on our wish list, you mean? The things we hope for?
Well, I mean, because it so often becomes sort of a bitter, partisan debate. Do you believe in this? Do you believe in that? Do you like this person? Do you like that person?
Oh, yeah, litmus tests.
Litmus test. So what would you like, beyond all that political stuff, would you like the people who have to decide to really consider when they feel your vacancy?
Well, the litmus tests don't work very well in the district court because we apply the law as it exists, either the statutes as they're written or the precedent that is in place. To the extent that we have to make interpretations or extrapolations from that, we do it within a very narrow range of options. So we're sticking pretty much to the settled facts with respect to the law that applies to those facts. Our role is to settle those facts. That's what we do here. So our philosophies of judicial interpretation and so forth don't play out in the district court like they do in the higher courts. That's not to say that we don't get accused of being activist judges or sometimes criticized for...
Does that bother you?
To be...
That people can't just say, you know, either they disagree with you or they agree with you, but to be suggest that you're an activist, that you're going to make laws from the bench, is that something that, as a judge, you go, what are you talking about?
Well, I think it's misused. I think it's used lots of times by people who came out on what they perceive to be the short end of a decision, that if the judge had hewn more closely to the established, settled law, that it wouldn't have been a decision that they were criticizing. So I think it's a misunderstood term and is used to criticize judges in sort of a broad brush way. That's what I usually think. The other thing I think about that is that that doesn't capture what the judge is doing. It wouldn't capture what I'm usually trying to do in a particular case. I'm not trying to strike out in a new direction and make a name for myself or push the envelope of legal interpretations and so forth. I'm trying to make a just adjudication of the particular case before me. So I don't decide issues. I don't decide whether the legislature should do some bit of social engineering. That's up to the Congress and to the General Assembly and the City County Council. I look to see what they did when somebody files a lawsuit, and I draw that lawsuit to measure it against the Constitution. And that's my limited function. So when somebody says, you know, I went through a time where I had a series of 10 Commandment cases. The 10 Commandments monument on the State House grounds, and they were dotted around in various public buildings, county courthouses, and other public park areas. And I was surprised to read from people who disagreed with my decisions that I must not be a religious person, or I must not believe in the 10 Commandments, or I must not be as strong in my faith as they are strong in their faith. To my knowledge, no decision that I've made on this court about the 10 Commandments monument or any other issue that has sort of a religious cast to it was made because it reflected my personal views. That's not what I do. If I wanted to do that, I'd run for the legislature. No.
In 2008, you gave a commencement address at Franklin College, which happens to be my alma mater.
I know that it is your alma mater.
And you quoted the 19th century author Emile Zola, who challenged people to live out loud. Mm-hmm. Have you been living out loud?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think so. It's such a good line from such an intelligent, able writer. I don't remember all the nuances of that speech, but I do.
I have it for you.
Living out loud means basically putting yourself out there. And I think, yes, that's who I am. Sometimes I get teased a little in proper ways, of course, about being sort of out there, being plain-spoken and maybe even sometimes blunt. Not in an unkind way, I hope, but I am sort of straightforward about things. But living out there means that you've engaged fully in the life around you, and that you've found ways to express values that you think are important, and ways you can be constructively engaged in the community and in individual lives. It's important to have a circle of close friends that can sort of speak truth to you when you need it, and federal judges need it as much as anybody.
Judge Barker will go on senior status in June, and she'll continue with her other full-time activities full-time, being a wife, a mom, a grandmother, and public servant. All roles she says she loves. You're watching Indianapolis This Week. For the latest news and weather, remember we are always on our RTV6 app and our website, theindychannel.com. Thanks for joining us. I'm Rafael Sanchez. Have a great Sunday and welcome home to all of you spring break travelers.